Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice is a game that came out a couple of months ago, and I had the pleasure of experiencing it and sharing it on YouTube during my Let's Play. Now, I've been sitting on it for a little while, and I've been thinking about everything that the game did well, everything that it didn't do well, and generally how the game fared at being a game. So I'm here to talk about all of that stuff with you guys. So without further ado, let's get into this. This game was crafted beautifully, with love and attention put into every single bit of detail. The sound, the gameplay, the graphics, everything was in full service of the story. I will do my best to break down everything individually, although it will be difficult as everything is linked together exquisitely in this title. But let's get up first with graphics. I wasn't really sure what to expect from the game, to be quite honest with you. I only saw one trailer going in. While that trailer looked fantastic, I always reel my expectations back because trailers are in general very hyped. Now, I'm glad to say that this game looks every bit as good as the trailer, which is phenomenal. Now, full disclaimer, I play the game on PC, on max settings, so I can't really speak for the consoles. However, I have seen some screen footage from the PS4, and there's still a great amount of detail in there, so you really can't go wrong with either version. The developers put a lot of effort into Senua's character, making sure that every wrinkle, blemish on the face is shown in crystal clear detail, which is necessary for the storytelling to work in this title. I will get into that a little later. The fabric on her clothing is exceptionally well done, and her animation is done very smoothly and realistically. The lighting effects in the game are absolutely top-notch. There is a real atmosphere that works perfectly, and I think that it sets a great tone for every part of the game. There are real dynamic moments of intense darkness with only slivers of light that break through. And there are even a few very bright, colorful moments that are on the warm side of saturation but fits the mood of the scene perfectly. This is really one of the prettiest games that I have ever played. That being said, I do have some complaints. There are times in the story where they place actual video recorded people next to Senua's 3D model, and while Senua's character is done exceptionally well, the fuzzy images of real people, you can tell that there's something off about her character, which kind of puts her in an uncanny valley. For some people, this might not even be a concern, but for others, like myself, it did pull me out of the experience just a little bit. It was great for the storytelling, I just think it could have been done a little better. Other than that, my only complaint are actually the enemy designs. Now, while they are highly detailed and look really good, they just lack some diversity. That may be a point of the story, but I would have really liked to see some more variations than big bulky men with animal masks coming at me. They just got kind of boring towards the end of the game. Other than that, everything is really great. The detail on trees and the ground and general textures, all well done. The way that light shimmers and fractures on other things, excellent. The effects from battle when metal clashes on metal and sparks fly. The way that the head on Senua's sash pulses when it breathes. Really look at that, it's so good. And the lighting on her focus symbol on her belt is done really well too. Super well done visual cue from the developers, and it deserves a lot of praise as far as the graphics go. Overall, exceptionally well done. Now let's get into the sound design of this game, guys. The sound exceeds anything that I have ever experienced in a video game ever before. In fact, the game takes so much pride in it that during the loading screen when you first start up the game, it calls to you to get headphones. Get them. You're doing a disservice by listening to this game on speakers. You really need to get some headphones to really get immersed in the experience. I don't care what they are. Find your favorite pair, throw them on, enjoy the sound. The game uses binaural mics to give you a real simulation of listening through someone else's ears. It uses this to have the voices go all around your skull. Left, right, front, back, sort of middle left behind, far away 36.7 degrees to your right. It's precise and full, and it will drive you insane in the best way possible. It will make you feel for the main character. The ambient sounds are also well done, mimicking spaces very realistically, putting you with Senua as she's going through her story. And on top of that, the game has a very wide dynamic range. This will mean that you will need to turn your sound up, because there are a lot of things happening that are very, very quiet. but what this also does is force the loud moments to be very, very loud and very impactful. The sound alone in some places was so chilling that I would actually have goosebumps. Now, I will be the first to admit that the voices in her head can be overbearing to the point where it backfires. I understand in a story sense that they are supposed to be there to be overwhelming and distracting. However, when I want to listen to a totem, these little optional relics that you can listen to learn more about the lore, I don't want to just stand there and wait while they bicker about nothing. I personally thought that that was unnecessary, and the overwhelming nature of them would have been just fine if there wasn't any overlap. The music is seldom, but well done. It makes you sad, or it gets you hyped to beat the living hell out of the enemies surrounding you. Though I did have a couple of times where the battle music ended mid-battle, and there was an awkward pause before it would kick in again. A little distracting, but not a big deal. Overall, superb sound experience for my ears. Next up is gameplay, and it might actually be the weakest part of the game. Don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean it's bad, it just means that the other things I felt were more refined and more tailored towards the game itself. The controls are well laid out, at least on the controller. I really only use keyboard and mouse for shooter games, and the reaction times are very fast when it comes to the character. However, the battling is pretty slow paced. It works well for this title though, and there is so much going on within the audio and the story for those long walks between battles that nothing feels really too empty. So the game starts off with a long opening, where Senua glides into this mysterious island alone. There are corpses on spikes, and the voice is telling you that it's a trap, and there's no escape, but she has to go anyway. So you go on, and unlike most games, there are no tutorials. You find your first totem, and immediately figure out which trigger to press in to zoom to listen to it, which leads back to presentation and just general level design. Whenever I walked up to the totem, it lit up in a way that I knew that I had to interact with it. So I just started pressing buttons randomly on my controller, and when I found the right one, a couple of things happened. I actually felt a little proud of myself, like just a little bit of satisfaction on being able to figure out something on my own, rather than have a tutorial just kind of like, show it on the screen, no, press this button to do this. Sure, that may have been faster and it makes sense, but there's some reward in being able to figure it out on your own, as well as, well, that information is kind of lodged in my brain now. I learn things better when I figure it out on my own. It's more of like a thing that you can't unlearn. It's pretty great, and I think it's the better way to do it, at least for simple mechanics. Anyway, so you venture forth, and you may immediately think that, well, it's kind of slow-paced, until you start looking at the things around you and realize, well, everything is beautiful and worth looking at. It wasn't even until the sound and the shadows frightened me that I even tried to sprint. And that's when I tried pressing a bunch of buttons again and eventually found out that the left bumper was the button that I was looking for. But even then, when I knew how to sprint, I didn't normally use it. The sights are so well done, and the voices keep things from being boring, so I was never in a rush. And this is really where it gets hard to remove the other parts of the gameplay. It all adds together. It may sound boring to walk through trees, but in this setting and the sound design, just watching the lights and the shadows shift and listening to the voices berate the main character, it's not boring at all. That is much of the first part of the game, just walking. It isn't until half an hour later that the gameplay is actually presented. Ever seen For Honor? Well, it reminds me a lot of it. The close over-the-shoulder view with an emphasis on timing and dodging. The field of view can be killer for some, but this is where the audio cues come in. The voices say, "Look out, behind you," and you can dodge. And the camera shifts to reveal this epic maneuver you just pulled off to escape danger, and it's awesome. The enemies do have generally very easy to read attacks, so it isn't Dark Souls levels of hard. Then again, I only played on the regular set difficulty level. I think I only died 3 or 4 times through the whole game. But to preface this, I did go back and watch some other reviews to kind of round out some things that I may have been missing from the game. And I didn't even realize until way later in my playthrough that there was a button I never used. Block. And apparently you can block indefinitely, which made the game very boring to some people. I never used it, so I had a lot of fun challenging myself to dodge. The battles are immersive and tense because of it. The field of view ties with the story, making you feel small, not superhuman, and at risk in your blind spots. Added to that are actually a large number of combos to play with. Mixing in left bumper with light attack causes you to lunge. Mixing in light attacks and heavy attacks in different sequences can perform different combinations. And then add kicking on top of that. And surprisingly enough, I was still finding new combos well into the game, which is really nice to see. The only other thing that I have to complain with the battling is, well, going back to the enemy designs. Their samey designs cause them to have similar battle styles, really slow and predictable attacks. The only one that broke this was my favorite boss Valrov, who was pretty early in the game. He required learning his movesets, which he had more than 2 or 3 attacks, and he had special abilities, and he was fast. Mastering the timing was essential for someone who didn't know how to block, which made it really fun, and I think more of the battles could have been done this way. Outside of battle though, there are puzzles to be played with. There are surgical symbols that unlock doors that are at first very hard to find until you get used to the game and start to realize that there's almost a rhythm into where you can look to find the symbols. They are in general very intelligently laid out, but every now and then I did get legitimately lost, and that slowed the pacing down even more than it already is. But other than those puzzles, there are several things that are more story-based that you have to do that I found to be a lot more enjoyable, like figuring out where to walk and why, and where you should listen, and what you need to do to find light. I'm getting rambly here because this is kind of bleeding into the story, which is where I think everything just comes together so well, and why I think the game is worth every little bit that it is. Make a sandwich of everything that I've talked about thus far. The graphics, the sound, the gameplay, and wrap it in the most self-loathing piece of bread ever. And that's what you get. That is Hellblade Senua's Sacrifice. That self-loathing piece of bread is the story. It wraps everything up. The dark tones, the subtle lighting, the close suffocating feeling of the battles, and the sounds that make you question everything that you were doing comes from the main character, Senua. She suffers from something called mental psychosis. The game developers hired specialists to explain and guide the experience so that it portrayed the mental illness accurately. And that love and dedication can be felt through everything. What's the point of the game? Well, Senua is riding a boat into the depths of hell to fight with the god that holds her loved one, Dillian's soul, so that she can revive him to be back with her. Through this linear experience, you learn many things, how he died, some more about her village and where Senua comes from, and a little bit about her family. Although the real point of the story is learning Senua as she discovers herself. That is good storytelling. That is great storytelling in a game. There is a dynamic in video games lately where people will hate a game because there's not enough gameplay and there's a lot of cinematic boo-hockey. And I will be doing a video about that later on, but I think Hellblade does a very good balance of everything. It is story-driven, it is linear, but the story is told so damn well, and it is told as much through the player's hands, their ears, and their eyes as much as it is in any non-playable cutscene. It is most certainly worth the $30, even if it is a shorter title at around 7 to 8 hours. There is so much passion for the lore, the character, and the player that the developers put into the game. So find some way to experience it. If you want to watch my playthrough, I'll leave a link here after this video is done in the credits. If you want to pick up the game, $30 is not a lot for games nowadays. Find some way to experience this game. Enjoy this somber sandwich and let it melt you. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any advice or any feedback on this video, let me know in the comments below. If you have any thoughts of Hellblade, definitely let me know in the comments, and I will be there with you guys discussing this. Thank you so much for watching. Catch you in the next one. Bye!